section 2 in chapter 4. This is the section is basics of budgeting, and I do think it's one of the more important sections in the book. So we'll kind of talk about it. We'll do some activities about it with budgets later on, but it's not something going away. But before we do that, we are going to do some discussion questions. I will open, you can chat to me again privately. You can chat if you're comfortable to the whole class. Remember, I am keeping track of your participation. And we'll still get out of here on time because I think we only have 9 slides today versus yesterday there were like 22. So it's a much shorter section. But what is the purpose of So there's the first question. What is the purpose of a cash flow statement? So this is what we talked about yesterday. We looked at a cash flow statement with cash inflows and cash outflows. What was the purpose of keeping one of those? Maybe you need to go back and look at your notes. Maybe you need to look it up in the book. So it keeps track of your income from your jobs, investments, and others. Yes? So to keep track of your income, money you receive, and what you spend. Yeah, so saying mostly the same thing, some people to everyone, quite a few of you to me privately. Yeah, so it keeps track of your income and what you spend your money on. So your cash flow statement has your income or your cash inflows, which is all money you bring in, and your cash outflows, what you spend your money on. So how does a personal budget differ from a cash flow statement? So we have not defined what a personal budget is. You may already know. That's what we're going to do today and talk about budgets. And I'm sure you know what a budget is. How does that differ? How is it different? How does a personal budget differ from a cash flow statement? What's your best guess? We haven't quite gone over this yet. So if you're not too sure and have a guess, that's okay. I'll take it. So you can set your budget lower than your cash flow statement. A budget is set over a period of time. So personal budget is kept for you and more little things are listed aside just from income. So maybe we're just not answering as much to this one because we're not as confident about what a budget is, and that's okay. We're going to go over it Let's see. Can you guys, nope, let me ask this next question. So what is the difference between fixed expenses and variable expenses? So fixed expenses stay the same and variable expenses vary. Yeah, and it's kind of, yeah, so fixed expenses, those don't change. They are going to stay the same. A few of you said that. So can you guys think of examples of some things that would either be fixed or an example of something that would be variable? So fixed expenses could be like a phone bill, variable could be water, electricity, and food. What are some other examples of fixed expenses? What won't change? Insurance could be a fixed expense. Car loans are another fixed expense, yes. Your rent. Or mortgage, depending on if you're renting or owning your home. Yeah, so loans are typically going to be fixed expenses. Restaurants and going out, those are going to be variables in your food. And then just kind of, can you guys think about, excuse me, can you recall how much money you've spent or what you've spent your money on in the past 2 weeks or month? Do you keep track? Do you pay attention? Do you just kind of spend freely and when your money's gone, it's gone? Maybe you haven't been doing as much the past, 2 weeks or month because things are still shut down places. So do you keep track of how you spend your money or do you just spend it? There are quite a few of you telling me that you do keep track. And that's great. That's perfect. You might not remember when you had money to spend. Look at how much you have. Yeah, so I think if you are keeping track, that's awesome. If you're not, that will eventually be a goal, hopefully, so that you can stay out of debt, essentially. So with that being said, we are going to jump in. Hopefully I can make it so that I can see the chat while I have the slideshow open today, but I don't know if I can. So here we go. Section 4.2 is basics of budgeting. So your notes, wherever you are taking your notes. So we're going to identify the purpose of a personal budget and prepare one. We won't actually prepare one today. We'll see one and we'll work on that later. And then describe record keeping methods used in the budgeting process. All right. So a budget defined by your book is a spending and saving plan based on expected income and expenses. So a budget is a plan. Whereas, so I kind of asked the question, how does a budget differ from your cash flow statement? A cash flow statement is keeping track of how much money you brought in and out. A budget is a plan on how much money you're going to bring in and what you're going to spend your money on. So essentially you do your budget first. So steps in preparing a budget. The first thing you want to do is estimate your income. Again, this is a plan, so you think about all the sources you'll have income from and you will estimate that. It could be weekly, monthly, yearly. I think a lot of people do more monthly budgets, but it doesn't matter. Then you want to plan your savings. Why is it important to pay yourself first? All right, so why is it important to pay yourself first? So why should you plan savings as steps in a budget? Okay, so to get everything you need out of the way before things you want, a few other people, so you have money put away before you can buy stuff that is not necessary. Yes. So it's important to pay yourself first. So put money into savings so that you have money to meet your future needs. It could be needing your car repaired if your car breaks down. It could be for retirement, putting that money, because none of us want to work forever. So it's important to pay yourself first so that you have money to meet your future needs. Step 3 is estimate your expenses. What do you plan on spending money on this month? Do you plan on going out to eat? And your budget can change from month to month. Maybe you celebrate Christmas, so in December you plan on spending more money because you're going to buy more gifts. So some of those variable expenses will change. And then you balance your budget at the end. So you want to make sure the total of your savings and expenses matches your income. And you can always, and if that was too high, you're going to have to take some expenses away. And if it was too low, you could always add more money to your savings. So here's an example of a personal budget for Andrea McCall. So she does hers weekly, monthly, and yearly. Her income is from work, part-time, her household chores, lunch money allowance, and savings account interest. So she gets all of these weekly, she multiplies by 4 by the month, and then she multiplies by 12 for the year. So she says she's saving $5.50 a week or $22 a month. And that you might be thinking that's not very much, but it will add up over time. And especially if you put it in an account that's going to make you some interest, that's not a bad idea. Even if it's small, start now if you can. And then her expenses, she said she's going to spend money on gifts, clothes and shoes, pay her parents back lunches, and entertainment or miscellaneous. So $50 a month. That bottom number down there for her weekly is $55.50, which comes from adding her savings and her total expenses, which happens to match her total income. So she got her balance, her budget balance. So we already talked about these. Fixed expenses are costs that do not change each month. It's kind of in the name. Your loan, car loan payments, your home loan, your rent. Your phone bill could be a fixed expense if you have like a plan that kind of has everything in it. But it could also be a variable expense if you're spending money on buying apps or other things. But if you know you just have your phone bill, that's one thing. Variable expenses are costs that can go up and down each month. Your PG&E bill, your water bill, your gas, how much you spend eating out, how much you spend on gifts. If something is a variable expense, like your PG&E bill, say you know your PG&E bill ranges from $200 to $300 each month. I personally recommend when you make your budget that you use the higher number, because you want to make sure you have enough money to cover it rather than having to dip into savings. Charitable giving is on here because a lot of people, maybe not a lot, there are people that include charitable giving as part of their budget, which is the act of donating money or time to a cause in which you believe. Annual expenses are expenses which occur once a year, such as insurance premiums and real estate taxes. So if you have an annual expense, you must divide these by 12 to get the monthly amount to budget. So for example, let's say that you own your home and your taxes on your home each year are $6,000. It's going to be hard to come up with $6,000 at one time if you weren't planning for it. But if you set aside $500 each month to pay those taxes, when you get the bill, you'll already have the money saved. Some insurance premiums and taxes are yearly and some are twice a year. So the same idea, you just want to make sure you're putting that money away so that you can not have to scramble or dip into your savings. You can have it planned ahead and have that money for those expenses. So when you're preparing a budget analysis, so that's going back and looking at how much money you actually did spend, you're analyzing it. Variances are the differences between planned amounts and actual amounts. Variances can be favorable or unfavorable, and we'll see that in a minute. Meaning you spent more than you thought, or you didn't spend as much as you thought, or you didn't make as much as you thought, or you made more than you thought. And expenditures are just items that you spend money on. So those are kind of part of your cash outflow statement when you're doing your budget analysis. So this is Andrea McCall's budget variances for August. So she's doing her budget analysis. So if I just look at that top row for work part-time, she thought she was going to make $120. She only made $110. So the dollar variance was negative because she made $10 less than she thought. So over here, the percent variance was negative 8%, which we would call unfavorable. Anytime the variance is negative, it's unfavorable. We'll talk more when we do the math about how to get the 8%. Hopefully this negative $10 makes sense. She made $10 less than she thought she was going to make. But her allowance, she must have done more chores, so she thought she was only going to get $40, but she actually made $50, so she made $10 more. So that's favorable, in her favor. It's positive, and it was a 25% variance. Again, don't worry so much about the percent as long as you understand the favorable or unfavorable. Was it positive or negative? Going down to gifts, she thought she was going to spend $20. She only spent $18. So that was $2 variance, meaning she has $2 left over. So it's favorable. She thought she was going to spend $60 on clothes and shoes. She spent $70. So that's a negative $10 variance. She spent $10 more than she planned. So it's unfavorable. But in the end, she still got this to balance out, because any money, that extra money she spent somewhere else, she didn't spend it in another category. So it's still balanced out in the end. Do we have any questions on the dollar variance, the positive and negatives? If you do, you can stick around after or type them to me privately. All right, so how to deal with those unfavorable variances, those negatives. So if your expenses are greater than your budget, meaning you spent more money than you thought, or if you make less money than you thought you were going to make, you have 4 options. The first option is to reduce your expenses, cut things like Starbucks and movies, eating out. That's going to be your best option. Some of you might already not do those things, so that might not be an option for you. Some of you know that you could probably cut those things quite a bit. Next, you could increase your income, maybe get another job, maybe try to work more hours. That could be difficult to do. Especially, if you're already working and in school, sometimes you just might not have more time, or there might not be more hours available. So that's not always realistic. You could sell your assets. So remember, those are things of value. Say you have a baseball card collection, you could sell it. It's kind of sad to do. Also, the problem with selling your assets is it's a one and done thing. You sell this baseball card collection for $100. Sure, that'll help you this month to cover the unfavorable variances. But what about next month? If you're not making a lifestyle change in reducing expenses or increasing your income, then you're going to be in the same situation next month. And the last option, which you absolutely do not want to do, again, you do not want to go into debt. You don't want to borrow on your credit card and have money that you can't, have this bill that you can't pay. You'll be giving the bank your money for, depending on how much debt you get into, could be for a long time. So don't go into debt. That's kind of one of the other big things that we're going to talk about in this class that I will emphasize, at least potentially. You want to budget so that you can avoid going into debt. All right, and then record keeping methods. Manual records are information recorded in hard copy format using pen and paper. So some of you may do this. You may actually write it down with a pen and paper. That's a manual record. But electronic records are soft copy formats of your financial information stored on your computer or your phone or whatever device you are using. I would imagine most of you are using electronic records. If you've seen like your grandparents balance their checkbook or something like that, those are going to be the manual records. The benefit of the electronic records is you can use spreadsheet software, which is a computer program that allows you to insert numbers and formulas to compute amounts and then easily change them later as needed. So Microsoft Excel, Google Sheets, those are spreadsheet software where you can type numbers in and type formulas in, and it'll do the math for you. So those of you sitting here thinking this section sounds awful, we have all this math, you can get it to do the computations for you. If you say, I plan on making money from these 3 places, and type in how much money you think you're going to make, it'll add them for you. If you type in the formula, which we will get some practice with. And then encryption, that's just a definition from your book. I'm not too worried about it. It will come up, I think, on your vocab worksheet. but that is the process of converting data to a coded form. It just helps, just kind of like how you have passwords on your accounts. It helps keep your financial records safe. These are some apps that Forbes recommends. I personally am not familiar with them. I have read a little bit about them last year. I totally forgot to read up on them this year. But Mint, LearnVest, and Power Wallet that will help do this stuff for you. And they have kind of preset categories to help you keep track of your spending if you didn't want to make your own spreadsheet. So here's an example of a spreadsheet. This is an Excel spreadsheet. So Alice here was making money from 3 different sources. So this box on B8 here at 355, that top 355, those are the 3 numbers above it added together. She's putting $100 in savings, and then she has these 5 different expenses of $255. You'll notice this bottom box is in green. That's the one highlighted. That's the one she's typing in. Up in the top above the column B, it says equals B11 plus B19. So she's adding B11, the $100, and B19, the $255, so that her total expenses are $355. So again, we have to learn how to type these formulas in, but if she goes back and kind of copies this, instead of for September, she needs to make it for October. Maybe she's gonna spend less on lunches and she can just change that number and it will redo the computations for her. That's the benefit, one of the benefits of the spreadsheets. But that is our last slide for today. So real quick, you have questions 1 through 22 out of the book. And there's something else, but I forgot. And if it's that important, I will post it in Google Classroom or remind you tomorrow. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. If you have